Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, or maybe today the internet's busiest linguist, as we're talking about a term and a phrase that is often thrown around in a lot of pop music discourse circles these days, the Khia Asylum. A very strange, storied, and pejorative phrase with interesting roots in hip-hop considering it literally references the rapper Khia, but is currently being thrown around left and right as a means of defining levels of success between different pop acts today. A lot of the discussions around who is and is not in the Khia Asylum can get pretty toxic. However, I hope to have a very productive and informative conversation today about the source of the term, its usage, and what exactly it means to be in or not be in the Khia Asylum, especially since there seems to be a greater awareness around it as a concept these days with artists like Bebe Rexha, as well as even Charli XCX in a recent interview, sort of a fan Q&A around her new film, The Moment. They're acknowledging it.
The doors to the asylum, I hear they keep them open for me. And I'd love to pop back in there, see all my cool friends.
So yeah, joining me for this conversation is the one and only Swiftologist. So here we go. Hey everyone, as I said, we have Zachary Horahan here, aka the Swiftologist, and let's talk about the Khia Asylum. I wanted to start off by sort of saying, as observers of popular music discourse, I wanted to get a sense from you, given this is a term that you and I have probably been seeing get thrown around for years, does it not feel like right now the usage of it, the awareness of it is at a bit of a fever pitch to where even pop artists themselves are kind of like acknowledging it and, you know, reflecting their knowledge of it back to the audience?
First of all, it's so good to see you again, bald-headed scallywag. Thank you for having me back.
Love seeing you too.
I think a moment of late that was noticeable to me was Charli XCX actually referring to this and shouting it out during a premiere of The Moment, of which we are co-stars, by the way.
We are co-stars in The Moment. I knew that was gonna come up at some point. You know, the green room interactions were awkward.
Yeah, it was really weird when we were on set that day. It was crazy. We had we were actually, I think in that situation, we would be part of the Khia Asylum. Like we would be the ones that are like needing a leg up, and Charli would be the one providing it to us. But Charli's an interesting kind of place to start with that, because I think for a lot of her career, she spent a lot of time, as she said, in the Khia Asylum. And she is thinking favorably and reminiscing on her time spent there. And I think you could also argue that like there would never be a Brat without a stint in the Khia Asylum. And there are a couple of artists, I think, that have mobility with the Khia Asylum. They have the ability to escape, whereas there are some who are kind of like more like doomed to eternal damnation there. And it's been really interesting to see how people move in or don't move out of that particular residency.
I mean, getting into that concept more, or maybe it's even important to kind of lay out what the border crossing is between being in and out. To put it simply, is it just a matter of popularity, how popular or successful you are as a pop artist, that puts you in and out of the Khia Asylum, or is there something else about it? Is it more than just a numbers game?
You know what? It is a very strange alchemy. When I try and think about like what is it that helps someone escape that place, it tends to be like a confluence of things. So it's like, it is the numbers, it is the streaming, it is the prevalence. It's like a certain penetration of the cultural memory. But I also think that there is an element of like timing and luck to it. And once you're out of it, it is pretty hard to get back in, because breaking out is kind of like a momentous occasion. If you're an artist that's been known to have been in it before and suddenly you are now out of it, it would take a drastic circumstance to fall back, but it's not impossible, as Charli has said and has been very aware. Someone that I think is currently breaking out or on the precipice of breaking out is Zara Larsson. She's been in the Khia Asylum for like a long time, and she's been having kind of like a very gradual and steady moment, like her rising since she started opening for Tate McRae. That was kind of like the beginning of it. Then this album, Midnight Sun, came out, which I didn't think was very good. And I gave a bad review too. And she got upset and her fans got upset and everyone got upset.
You've been getting some flack for that Zara Larsson review.
I stand by it. I mean, I still don't think that the album is very good, but that's kind of neither here nor there when it comes to breaking out of the asylum, because she had all you need is one song. I really do think that like a single song can break you out of the asylum. Sabrina Carpenter did it with Espresso. Like it can be a really focused moment, and it really depends on how you, the artist, use that breakout moment as leverage to your next thing. That's really like the determining factor of whether you're going to stay there or not. So Zara Larsson has this moment with Midnight Sun, but I also think she's leveraging that into the Pink Pantheress collab, and she's making intelligent decisions on how she's breaking out. So I think I wouldn't say she's quite there yet, because I do think that part of breaking out means you have to stay out for a period of time, but I do think that she's on the precipice.
It's funny to hear you say that, like, it's very difficult or it's rare to kind of end up back in there, because what I get the sense from seeing a lot of fans throw the term around so much, it would seem as if almost like you could just go back in overnight. Like, because I see sort of like almost in these moments of cruelty, this term being employed to not just describe artists who are relatively obscure than maybe some of the biggest pop stars out there. But I see it also used and thrown around when they're trying to be negative, maybe against pop stars they don't like, sort of threatening the idea that like, oh, you're going back. Like, oh, you may have had this moment now, but you know, next year, believe me, you'll be nothing. You're going right back to the Khia Asylum.
And it is kind of like a vaguely powerful threat, because the attention economy is kind of more important than anything else at the moment. So if you've had your moment, I suppose the threat would be that that can all go away if we decide that we don't like you anymore. Someone like a Taylor Swift is going to be particularly resilient to those things because of the stature and like the infrastructure of her career. But when you look at someone like a Sabrina Carpenter or a Chappell Roan, or someone that has really just kind of come up very suddenly, that can theoretically go away. I mean, I really look at someone like a Camila Cabello when I think of someone that has escaped and is kind of like inched back into the Khia Asylum. I personally don't think that she belongs there. I thought CXOXO was like the most interesting and like weird kind of avant-garde thing that she's ever done. She's never been a particularly interesting or exciting artist to me, but
she took some risks on that album.
She took risks. And I think that sometimes when you take a creative risk like that and you stop playing straight to the middle, that can actually send you back to the Khia Asylum, which is counterproductive, because you would think that the best and most daring creative moves would break you out of it. But I think it's not even really about that. It is kind of that nebulous, like, are you having a moment or are you not having a moment? And if it doesn't land, if it takes a while to slow burn, like that means that it didn't happen for you.
Are there, you know, levels at all to the Khia Asylum, or, you know, can you be like sort of, I don't know, a pop artist or a pop leaning artist who is maybe super left field or alternative in some sense, and you know that like their vibe, their sound, their style is never going to go as mainstream as like Taylor Swift per se, but like, you know, they've reached maybe a certain ceiling of popularity, and as a result of that, they've broken out. You know, they're sort of as successful as they're going to be.
That's actually a great question. And I recently made a video called The 7 Levels of Pop Girl that actually directly addresses that. So like my level 2, the level up from being a catastrophic flop, is being a Khia Asylum escapee, like someone that really like kind of really trying to, or maybe has at some point broken out of being a flop, but is like not quite there yet. The level up from that is like a level 3A or a 3B. So a 3A is someone who I think is not safe from going back, but is kind of being tested for the wider market. So that would be, to me, like a Tate McRae or a Gracie Abrams, like people that are having a moment, but it's not kind of tested whether that moment is going to be sustained. Then I have like a 3B category, which is for these kind of like very specific, what you're talking about, like niche artists that don't have a sound that is naturally going to blow them up. So like an Ethel Cain would be a good example of that. Like that's not ever going to be the biggest, most dominant mainstream sound in the world, but she's got a really devoted, like niche cult following, and a sustained level of some interest is better than fleeting, mild interest, which is what I think the Khia Asylum really is. It's like you don't have stands, and you also don't have the general populace. So it's really difficult to place you.
Okay, good to sort of think of it in that way, and sort of like, linking this to an artist who maybe I'm wrong here, tell me, but like thinking of Ethel Cain, I also of course like am reminded of Lana Del Rey as an artist who her music is obviously very popular. It's very relevant in many circles, especially alternative circles, and it's obviously highly influential. To even artists who are much bigger than her, obviously. I mean, being a Taylor Swift fan, but despite the fact that there is maybe a certain ceiling that she has probably hit or, will never surpass because of like how turgid and sort of like long-winded a lot of her songs are, you wouldn't say she is somebody who's like in the Khia Asylum. Like she's like pretty.
Absolutely not. No. Lana is, I mean, her footprint on modern pop is still being replicated today. I don't know if you're familiar with this person, but her name is Remy Bond. And she has like launched an entire kind of like, I would say 3B pop career. She's edging towards an Ethel Cain space. And her whole thing is literally doing Born to Die, like an exact replica of that.
There's actually a lot of people out there reheating. There's a lot of people out there reheating Born to Die now that it's like kind of been out there long enough. And it's just funny to see because like, that was that was Lana's probably most polarizing era in terms of like, the critics really slagging her, which I mean, I didn't really care for the album that much either. But I prefer her more recent stuff now, but now that stuff has sort of been like battle tested and almost like normalized in a lot of ways, it feels almost like a lot safer for artists to sort of like copy it.
Right. And there really wouldn't be like a Lorde or a Halsey or a post Taylor Swift at a certain point without that Born to Die sound. A Marina, like she was very, very influential, I think, for a lot of people in that specific moment. And I think because of that, she gets to have this agility that other pop stars don't have, because Lana like sells like a main pop girl and can fill a stadium, but hasn't had a hit in years. That's a really interesting place to be in. And it's a rarefied space that pretty much only she occupies. The other pop girls really have to at least chase like some sort of like algorithmic trend relevance. Lana's just doing whatever the hell she wants to do. And sometimes she doesn't want to do anything. And it is kind of impressive that one really, really deeply influential cultural moment can carry you forward into relevancy through the rest of your career, so long as there are still people referencing it and keeping that original thing alive. And I think that Lana has never meaningfully returned to that sound either, which is strange because it is the most, I'd say that's how people remember her. And I mean, she is kind of like a pick me girl. So she's obviously not going to do the thing that you want her to do. And so she won't go back to Born to Die. But I think, yeah, so the fact that it's being replicated a lot keeps her safe.
My favorite album from her is Ocean Boulevard. And, part of what makes that record, it's like a bit of a love-hate thing I have with it. But she like kind of ends the album off with like a handful of cuts that are very clearly going back to that sound. And while they're not my favorite songs on the album, it almost like I sort of understand the purpose they serve within the track list, because it's almost like a ha ha he he, like look at the contrast between then and now. And let me sort of like, revisit this now that I'm in a position where I almost have this like, the sort of critical acclaim that I didn't come into the game with. And now people are probably maybe going to give this a little bit more of a chance than they did originally, like off the bat. But with that being said, even if you do have this cultural moment, can these long-standing strands of time in one's career where you're not having a hit, or you're sort of like, trending away from those sort of aesthetics and vibes that, weren't necessarily, or what I want to say is actually like sort of defined your sound and made you popular in the first place. Can that land you in the Khia Asylum? Or is it always like this, grand sort of drop and fall from grace where you have, made a big mistake or effed up in some sort of way? Like, for example, not just Lana, but is someone like Kesha in the Khia Asylum, for example? Because it has been a while since she's like, been making this sort of like trashy party girl pop that she was once known for. But, personally, as somebody who's enjoyed many of her recent records, I very much respect the fact that she's like, been putting forward all of these like really personal, introspective ballads that are like really well performed and put together and thoughtful, but they're not pop hits per se.
Kesha is a heartbreaking case. I love Kesha, very deeply attached to that like original version of her. And I agree, there have been like moments of interest and intrigue on her latest projects, but like the thing that she most recently put out, period, I think that was very much an attempt to recapture something she once had. That can land you in the Khia Asylum very quickly, I think, is when you stop iterating and you start trying to recapture something you once had and it doesn't work. Like
so doing it over again can land you back in there. Doing it over again can land you back in there.
It could also lift you up. It's kind of like Hilary Duff is in an interesting space right now because I think that she is like flirting with an evolution of her sound after having been away for so long and having never really been a main pop player to begin with. Even when she was in her heyday, I wouldn't have said that she was like the most famous, the most successful, the most relevant, the most creative pop girl ever. But I think what she's doing is like sufficiently different enough from what she's done before that it is elevating her beyond just being a nostalgia moment. Whereas Kesha, by trying to redo the exact same thing, is putting herself at a disadvantage, almost on the back foot a little bit.
Now that we've kind of reached this moment culturally where throughout all of pop discourse, there is like this awareness of this term and this concept. And as we were kind of saying at the start of the conversation, where we're seeing times where pop artists are referencing it and talking about it, like in the case of Charli. With that being so fresh and recent, my read of it very quickly has been like the reception to that comment of her kind of, laughing it off and talking about how she would love to go back because she would see all her friends again and so on and so forth. It was very funny. It seemed like a lot of people liked it and thought it was really cool. But are there ways of kind of referencing it and talking about it that are hurtful or self-destructive? Because another recent kind of occurrence that has been on my mind is like the new Bebe Rexha album cycle, because she's like really been leaning into the idea that like she's in the Khia Asylum and she's sort of like, masterminding this grand plot to break out. And that's what this whole new album cycle is. And she's been sort of like, in a very kind of like campy, funny way, whining to fans about how she's a flop and she's this and she can't lose weight and she's and everyone hates her and, her career's like sort of like at a standstill. Is this sort of like, from your point of view, is doing that landing? Is doing that a good thing, a bad thing? Are you kind of like putting the nail in your own coffin by approaching the topic that way? Or, is feeding into the meme, never the wrong option?
It's so deeply unserious how serious this conversation is, but I think
hey, that's my vibe.
It's true.
Deeply serious, unserious conversations.
That's what I love to do. But I think Bebe Rexha is such, like, when you said her name and you said her album campaign, I immediately like winced and was like, oof, that's a great example.
I saw the look on your face.
She's in there and she's rattling the bars of the enclosure. But I think part of it is like it's almost like a birthday wish. Like, you really shouldn't say it out loud, because if you say what you want out loud, it probably won't come true. I feel like Zara Larsson only announced that she was in the Khia Asylum when she felt like she was breaking out of it. And she was so jubilant. I mean, she said it in an interview. She was like, I'm out. Yay, I'm free. And Bebe Rexha has like explicitly been like, I'm next. Like, pick me, like tag me in. But like, attention really is like, it is a finite resource. And I do think that like there can only be so many like main players, pipelines to have from nothing to something at any given time. And unfortunately for Bebe Rexha, like, the stars need to align and the music also has to hit, and something has to go on that is like either different or like hitting in a way that hasn't hit before. And I think with a person like Bebe Rexha, like it just feels as though there's a lot of trying and not a lot of like effortless coolness going on, because being a Khia is like telling someone that they're lame, like they're a loser. It is mean, to answer your question. It is a mean thing to say. And it is an accusation that people like lobby and level against other artists when they want to tear them down. And I imagine that it must be very demoralizing when you are an artist like Bebe Rexha that's been like trying to be on the come up and has like brushed up against it many, many times over the years. And you see people that once were in conversation with you and where you were, you see them suddenly having a different fate and you think, okay, it's me, it's my turn now. But it's not everyone's turn. Not everyone can have a turn. It's not egalitarian like that. There isn't like a set number of years or a certain number of hits that you have to have that will lift you up. There really is something kind of like cruel and kismet about it.
Mm. The Khia Asylum, is it somewhere that all artists start at? Like, is it a starting point, or is it something that you sort of like get labeled with after people have seen you around for a minute and are kind of like realizing, okay, this person isn't like taking off immediately? You know, some people's careers obviously start off quite explosively, but you know, do you begin there? Is it the starting point regardless of where you are?
I don't think so, because when I think of someone like a Billie Eilish or an Olivia Rodrigo, for example, as very contemporary examples of like pop girls that have broken through, they were never in the Khia Asylum. Like they weren't lingering there. It wasn't an issue for them to like, people were never saying you're not relevant, which is basically what you're saying to a Khia Asylum attendee. You can say nobody knows you, people aren't aware of who you are, but that's different to you're not relevant. Being in the Khia Asylum is like, people know who you are, they just don't care. So someone like an Ava Max, a Bebe Rexha, Zara Larsson up until right now, those people have some sort of like familiarity. And even though you're familiar with them, you're still not curious enough to explore more. That is the real like.
Okay, so pause. That's an important distinction. It's not about not being known. It's about people know you, but you're not exciting.
Mm-hmm. They're not interested for whatever reason. It doesn't mean that you're not good. It doesn't mean that you're not doing something interesting. It just means that the alchemy is not alchemying.
Yeah, it's more about a reception.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a big hit, like if you're a one-hit wonder, I think you're much more likely to fall into the asylum because people have an expectation of who you are. Carly Rae Jepsen is a great example of someone that I was going to say her. She could be stuck there, but she kind of has pivoted into, like, she's made being flop a bit of an art form. Like, she's kind of an example of like the best case scenario of being a Khia. Like, people rally around you because you have flopped, and all of a sudden that gives you like a devoted fan base and like creative license to do whatever you want. So that would usher her into like a 3B and Ethel Cain territory rather than being like a Zara Larsson or an Ava Max. And the difference would be is that people care.
You know, she's also a very interesting case in that she has a lot of people riding for her in like the indie scene. You know, there's like a lot of indie fans who, even though she's not like an indie artist by any stretch of the imagination, at least not in the traditional sense, there's a lot of indie fans that love her and just like really kind of get a lot out of her music. And, you know, there are people who have kind of taken to her to levels that have, you know, kind of even been surprising to me when I was reviewing like kind of what was sort of her breakout album in that arena emotion. Even though my review was positive, not glowing, but positive, a lot of my viewers and fans, like, you know, I was on like a speaking tour, like not too long after, and was like, you know, meeting face to face with a lot of people who were watching that Carly review, like maybe months after I had done it, like the same year, and we're like spinning the album. It's like, oh man, this is so good. I've been listening to it like constantly. And I was like, I never thought all of you like experimental rock weirdos who've been watching me for years would like really fuck with Carly, but it almost like in a way seemed to be a case of like Baby's first pop album or something among a lot of like college kids around the time.
Getting a vote of confidence or a vote of cool from another genre, I think can really help a pop star be lifted up from the dregs of like algorithm hell. Because there is like, if you're not popular and you're not cool, then are you making something good? That, because Carly Rae Jepsen was not popular, and I would say has never really been cool. That's not been her thing. She's not like an aspirational pop star. She's very earnest and very sincere, and you would think that that wouldn't really translate to the kinds of people that you're talking about that she has really resonated with. But she has a quality that has been picked up on as legitimate or good or artistically important, and I think that can also help you and save you. If you don't have that either, Khia forever.
Okay, exploring and defining the term further, because we made it pretty clear, like being in the asylum doesn't necessarily mean you're making bad music. There are a lot of artists in the asylum who are making good quality artistic music. But can you break out of the Khia Asylum making bad music? Like, you know, and like, you know, are there moments where the aspiration, the image, the marketing, this and that, all of the other factors that we see make popular music popular outside of the music, are there moments where all of that can be so good that you break out of the Khia Asylum, even though you're kind of making garbage?
You know what? Everyone's going to get mad at me, but I'm just going to say it. Like, Zara Larsson, I'm sorry, is not making very good music right now.
Stop.
I stand by my album review.
You don't like Pretty Ugly?
Isn't it the greatest song you've ever heard? Don't you love it so much? Isn't
It's
it the
so
number one hit
fun.
heard around the world? Yeah, it's
I mean,
amazing.
look, I can only go so hard on you about it because I didn't review the album myself, and not out of fear or anything like that. There are moments that I thought were like kind of underwhelming. Like the ballads weren't hitting for me quite as much, but like the really sort of the banger moments I thought were working, even if it wasn't like the most cohesive album. But you think she's an example of
I don't think
you're making bad
right?
stuff.
So I don't think it's great. I think it's middling. I would say like there's, and really this is obviously there's an element of taste to this as well. Like it's just not for me. And also it's not really meaningfully different from anything she's done before. So like I wasn't blown away by it is what I'm saying. And I think that like the things that are breaking her out right now are the rainbow belt and the keychains all over it that people on TikTok want to recreate. The makeup looks, people are like recreating the Midnight Sun makeup look all over their face. She's on tour with Tate McRae. That's a huge boon. Like that is a viral event already. People have their phones up. They're ready to capture a moment. She understood that. She built in these like choreo moments, even though it was very low budget. She was giving it everything. She's an incredible performer. Like all of those things are more important and play a bigger part in her ascent out of the Khia Asylum than the actual music itself, in my opinion. Now, this Pink Panthers collab is good. And Midnight Sun, the song, is pretty good. But overall, I would say she's not pushing a product that's like dramatically different from anything she's done before while she was in the asylum.
Okay. So but I mean, opinions and personal preferences aside, which I mean, a lot of music is all about anyway, but, in your view, you can be making like pretty mediocre music, but, break out of the asylum. It's not always a music quality thing.
Maybe I need to retract that and say you can make mediocre and mid music and break out of the asylum. I don't think you can with bad. If it's just straight up bad, then I think everybody will coalesce around the fact that it's a flop. I mean, look at 143. That was never going to go anywhere, despite everything else around it that could have potentially helped it. The fact that it was so bad just made everything so much worse.
With that album, and I think this probably is an important, maybe another moment to kind of define this, is that album. I mean, first off, is Katy Perry in the Khia Asylum at this point? And is 143, is this era an example of, can you think of a greater example of an artist who at one point was so, in recent memory, so high, and then we're seeing this massive differential between the peak and the valley? Have we seen sort of like, is it Khia Asylum, and has there been a bigger drop in recent years?
I can't say that I have witnessed a bigger drop than that. No pun intended. Can I get a witness? I think that Katy Perry is unfortunately 100% in the Khia Asylum, and that she has become a lol cow now. Like Katy Perry is kind of like an effigy for everything that we hate about out of touch pop stars, going to space, the Daisy, like multiple, everything she does is like automatically kind of cringe. And that is a key part of being in the asylum, is that like nothing you do can give you an air of like mystique or cool, which I think is really essential in pop music. And I think the fact that there was such a concerted push behind the record, so many resources developed towards this like colossal flop, this complete like misalignment and misjudgment of what the market wanted, what her fans wanted, what anybody was even expecting from a Katy Perry record. It was also a precipitous decline. Like she had really, Witness, I think, was the original Stone. Like that really did a number on her. It made her very embarrassing. The live stream, the Ellen DeGeneres haircut, that didn't endear her. And then it was like a series of unfortunate events after that that just made her this like caricature of something that she used to be. And it honestly, the real tragedy about Katy Perry's 143 and like her decline, it has made me question, like, was Teenage Dream even that good? And I've revisited it as an album, and like the singles are really great, but was it an incredible album? Was there more juice there to wring out? I don't know. I don't think that One of the Boys, her debut, was particularly stellar either. And Prism, which followed it, was, I would say, very mid. So it has made her seem like less of a star to flop that bad.
I mean, as you said, like in regards to Katy Perry, one song or a handful of songs can break you out of the asylum and make you that girl, essentially. Maybe we've sort of been looking back on that album, sort of maybe looking at it a bit like rose-colored glasses, like it is sort of like a very consistent, very kind of almost like classic status record, just because of the longevity of its most major moments.
And people talk about it all the time as well. I think that gives it this sort of like legend in memory, and it broke all of these chart records. But when I think about how would Teenage Dream land if it came out today, I'm not sure that it would have the same kind of resonance that it did when it first came out. There are certain songs like Teenage Dream, for example, title track, evergreen. But a song like Firework, I think that would be deemed as cringe if it came out now. There was like an Obama optimism, like hopefulness about Katy Perry that just doesn't exist in the world anymore. And pop stars also are kind of like reflections of where the culture is and what the mood is. And you'll notice the like overall sonic changes like shift as that mood changes as it goes along. And Katy Perry has never been able to meet the moment post that moment. She's kind of remained stuck there trying to make the same thing happen over and over again while falling continuously out of touch with what is actually going on. So the best artists, I think, are kind of chameleon in that way. They can understand that like, okay, I might have a thing, but I need to adapt that thing for whatever's going on right now. Because to be a pop star is not to create whatever you want, whenever you want, and it's your beautiful artistic baby. Maybe you're lucky and you're Lana Del Rey and you can do that. But most pop girls can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, not to like you said, like Katy Perry does have like some evergreen tracks, but there are moments in her catalog that do have this like sort of vibe and sort of essence about them that just would not land today because it's not sort of like the time for Obama sort of optimism. I feel like most people are like instead looking for the nearest Molotov to grab and throw, which is not sort of like an Obama optimism, sort of faith in the system kind of vibe.
No, it's Firework, but in a different way, in like a sad, scary way.
It's like fire.
Like
it's firebomb.
Way.
It's firebomb.
Yeah, it's firebomb. It's insurrection. It's not exactly like the funnest thing in the world. I think also it's something that actually just popped into my brain while we were talking about that. I do notice there's a very gendered element to discussions about the Khia Asylum. We tend to really only talk about women being there. And I think that's because the like founding origin story is that Khia is a Beyonce trier and she came for Beyonce. And, you know, if you come for Beyonce, you're cursed forever and you're going to flop. And she became like the effigy of a flop. But, you know, there are plenty of male Khias, way more than female Khias, and they don't get the same smoke that a female pop star gets when they flop. Like the best example of like a Katy Perry adjacent example to me, Fall from Grace, would be Justin Timberlake with like Man of the Woods. Oh, humiliating fall from grace, especially from someone that was really perceived to be like an auteur and like a real artist and someone that again was really of the moment that he came from, who also did manage to kind of like successfully ride a few different waves, like the NSYNC thing, then like the Timbaland thing, and then kind of the corny like white guy in suit wife guy thing, and then it all just
the
kind
2020
of fell
experience,
apart. Yeah, and then it just it fell apart.
Yeah, and he has not bounced back with it. It's funny to even hear you mention Man of the Woods and completely like omit the new album because the new album.
Oh, there's another one.
Yeah, there's.
You see,
not even mentioning the title, you know, and
is that the one that's like put your filthy paw, or is that Man of the Woods too?
No, that might have been Man of the Woods too. No, oh God, the new one started off with that single that had like the super low key like beat, and it was like a very subdued song. It was like
it missed me. Thank God.
I mean, it wasn't, you weren't missing much. It's fine.
Well, Justin Bieber's been in the Khia Asylum and has gotten out. I think men have more mobility than they should in the Khia Asylum. They're not like sent there for eternal damnation. I think that's because the pressure to reiterate and evolve between eras is not as intense. We don't expect dramatic rebrands, but like someone like a Shawn Mendes, he's fully a Khia. Like his latest record was so bad. It was a flop too commercially. Didn't do anything, didn't make any noise, didn't produce a hit, didn't yield any insights. He's there, Benson Boone's there, Alex Warren's there. There are a lot of male Khias, a lot.
You know, what do you think, you know, makes it easier for somebody like Justin Bieber to kind of move in and out or just be more free between one side and the other?
He's cool. I know that sounds like so nebulous, but like Justin Bieber is cool and kind of always has been, even when he's being a bit of a provocateur. Like in a different world, I feel like Kanye West probably could have done the same kinds of like weird provocations that Justin Bieber has done without crossing that line into like fully bigoted, mentally ill territory. But like they have actually like a similar streak, I think, for antagonism, but also like a deep need to be loved by the people. And that really animates a lot of Justin Bieber's work. He was also controlled a lot of the time by Scooter Braun, I believe, in my opinion. So it has been a bit of a journey as a child star, someone when you become famous that young, like it kind of fucks with you, I think. So you have to find who you are amongst that chaos. But I think the fact that we're a little bit repulsed by Justin Bieber and we find him to be quite off-putting, that makes him more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when I see sort of like greater Justin Bieber discourse, it does sort of seem like regardless of what he's doing musically, whether it's good or it's not, there's always an element of intrigue to it because of the way that we're kind of like reading it within the greater trajectory of his career from, you know, little baby, highly managed, you know, sort of like Usher protege, to kind of seeing him grow up into, you know, a teenager where he's rebelling and he's fucking up and he's, you know, on the verge of kind of like destroying his career entirely and then doing whatever the hell he is now. You know, I mean, I thought Swag had a lot of like, you know, high moments on it and a lot of quality tracks, but simultaneously kind of like a mess of a record, especially when you take into account the part 2 of it that had even more.
I pretend that doesn't exist. I pretend that doesn't exist. That's wife guy content. That's none of my business. But like part of Swag was like, it was over bloated. It was stuffed with things that were like just replicas of each other. It was kind of redundant a little bit. And why does Justin Bieber get away with that? And Zara Larsson doesn't get to make the same album 4 times. It's an interesting question. It is an interesting question. I think we're also just inherently tuned in to his personal life and mythology. He's like a real famous person. And a real famous person, it's really difficult for you to go into the Khia Asylum because, again, people have to care about you to really hate you. Katy Perry's in an unfortunate place where people don't care enough to really hate her, but they do care enough to make fun of her. So like that makes her a Khia.
You know, you're going to hate me for that. You're going to hate me for this. You're probably this will be maybe our biggest headbutt moment, but I see Swag almost as if it's like his tortured poets department. You know, you're working with these producers that have like indie cred, the look on your face, you have these producers that have indie cred that you're working with, and you do this double album situation where you're just like completely out of control. You're not editing yourself at all. And it's just like complete sprawl and you're just going on.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I'm
about to beat this bitch up. Audience note.
I will say Tortured Poets Department, with the separation between Aaron and Jack, there is, you know, more focus to both sides. You know, Swag and Swag 2 is definitely like kind of cringe just calling it Swag 2. It's
Anthony, this is like when you didn't get Addison and you won't get it because you can't, because it's not part of your range. It's not part of your vocabulary. You just don't have the sauce to understand it. So I'm not even going to go there with you on Tortured Poets. I can't.
You know,
I can't. It would take too long. It would take too long. It would take too long. And you know what? It really is. It's in her top 3 best albums of all time, and it's a sister album to Red. And if you had a brain, you would know that, but you don't. So you don't.
You know, I would when Addison makes a record as good as Ray of Light, I'll get it. Okay, I'll get it then.
Oh,
all right.
That's the bar she has to clear. That's, you know,
that's what she's referencing. That's what she's referencing
from time to time. That's not the entire reference.
From time
that's
to time,
not all of it.
Not all
in
of
times
it.
like these. Well, yeah. So I do want you to die for that, first of all.
That's fine. Yeah.
I'm going to have to pretend that I didn't hear the Torture Poets part. I can see the argument that you're making. If Showgirl was 50 songs long, I would be like, totally, I get it. Because Showgirl, to me, the lack of editing on that album is so much more transparent because there's less of it. So it's like clearer that the editing is not there, and then it has made a project that feels inconsistent and overstuffed even at 11 tracks. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay. You know, I will admit I was kind of just breaking your balls a little bit there. I just wanted to get a rise out of you.
You know what? I didn't think that you were going to say that. I thought you were going to say something else. And when you said the words Tortured Poets, I was like, now he needs to shut up. Bald-headed scallywag at it again.
I'm just trying to give our fans what they want, because I feel like they've been anticipating us. They've been waiting for a fight to brew.
No, we've been playing nice. That's the thing.
Yeah,
but it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. Like, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to find where you live, and it's going to be over for you soon.
Okay, that's fine. I've always wanted to meet you, so it's totally cool.
See, my number one fan.
Yeah. So, you know, to take it back to Charli, and I don't know how much of this era that you're aware of that I thought was very interesting for me as somebody who's been a fan of her work for a while. and has been sort of like watching her trajectory for a long time. And, wasn't really necessarily the biggest fan of her first record, which arguably did have like massive mainstream pop hits on it. There was a moment where early on she was like that girl out of the gate and had the,
Boom clap.
Iggy Azalea track as well, the Iconopop track, so on and so forth. And then immediately sort of like dipped down into these sort of like experimental, weird, wild, sort of like, left field pop sounds that would eventually sort of like become hyper pop in a lot of ways. But then when that almost like reached a bit of a saturation on the internet during the COVID pandemic, it's almost like she became kind of like aware of that, maybe to a fault, and decided to sort of like go into a new direction with the album Crash, which to my ears was almost like her consciously trying to make a mainstream pop album, or a pop album that would be comparatively more marketable than anything she had done up until that point. And the result was a much milder, sort of like response, not only from her hardcore fans, but also from, I think, like the audiences of people who she was trying to appeal to in the first place. Like with doing an album like that, again, with whatever your sort of knowledge of that era is, did that era read as sort of like not being as cool as like what she's trying to do now with Brat?
Oh, firm knowledge of that era. I think that's a really interesting part of Charli's career and lore. I agree with you. I think that Crash was a concerted attempt to break out of the asylum. That's really what it was. And she dressed it up in like so many layers of meta. She was like, the thing is that I've always been able to be a huge pop star. I've just never really tried. So here's me trying. And then she tried and it didn't work. And I feel like that really got glossed over by the fact that Brat did work. But Crash to me was like quite an embarrassing moment. That was like a real Khia moment. It really felt like she was trying to make something happen that wasn't happening and people weren't interested in. And it also seemed like she was kind of abandoning the credibility that she had amassed in that period of time between Sucker and Crash. It was like, okay, well, you threw out the baby with the bathwater to do like Number One Angel and to do Pop 2. Like you were willing to give it all up for that and really doubled down on being a niche legend. So what is this fixation all of a sudden on becoming a main pop girl? It's something that's very important to Charli. And I mean, she sings about it on Brat too. Like we forget that Brat comes from a Khia place. Like that's the album is the experience, the life of a Khia girl. That really is what Brat is. Sympathy is a knife, girl so confusing. It's about the comparison games that the industry plays and how she felt that she was inadequate in so many different ways. And it's interesting that like once she kind of dropped the bravado and was like, okay, I accept that not only am I not a mainstream commercial artist, I can't just force myself to be one. That's when everything clicked. And I think she makes it seem a lot more like in her retelling of it, a lot more that she had a lot of more narrative control over the situation than she did. But I think that Brat truly, like all great cultural moments, was something that could have only happened at that time with a certain confluence of factors, of course, with careful planning from Charli. But that Khia Asylum moment prior to Brat really was very essential for her to get there.
Yeah, I mean, as anybody who's been like watching her closely, and there are a lot of people who just kind of hopped on the bandwagon because of Brat who might buy into that sort of framing that you just noticed there. But again, as somebody who like was literally there in Europe watching her perform songs from Brat like weeks before it came out, like she had no plan or conception that the album was going to blow up as big as it did. Obviously, like
she thought it was going to flop at first, right? She was like,
right.
Well, I might as well just put this out because like, who cares at this point?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the things that she's saying on particular tracks, like she's almost saying as if this might be my last thing. If like it doesn't go anywhere from here, like it's probably pretty much going to be done. I'm thinking of what my life's going to be like once I'm married and a mom and so on and so forth. Like, it just kind of is what it is. And then, she's kind of like amending a lot of that stuff on the remix album and sort of like reflecting on the way her life has changed so dramatically in this short span of time with the album doing as well as it is. But now, and this, I think, is maybe kind of like new territory, in sort of like general or maybe just specific to Charli, but is it sort of like necessarily a bad thing from what you've seen so far? And obviously we say this and we engage in this conversation with the bias instilled in us by virtue of us being in the moment. But
Of course,
still,
yes, stars of the show.
Stars of the show, the secret stars of the film. Is it, potentially sort of like a bad thing for her to be acknowledging the fact that she just will not let her boot off of the neck of the pop fans by sort of like feeding further and further into Brat as much as she can, even with this new like promotional video that she did with A.G. Cook, like producing, where she has all of these like Charli copies like twerking and whipping their hair amongst a backdrop where it says like dead horse, dead horse, dead horse. Like I'm beating it. I'm shoving it in your face.
Right. It's like Charli loves to do a meta moment, but I think a lot of the time with her, it veers into pretension or like meta for the sake of being meta, like meta without a point, meta without like a really serious point of reference. And if I haven't seen the moment, like it hasn't come out in Singapore. I didn't get a screener. I actually don't know what goes on. I didn't get a
screener either. I thought we were going to come on here. I wasn't even going to say it. I didn't even say anything because I thought you were going to be like, I haven't seen it either. I got a screener. I've seen it. I was like, how did you get a screener? I was going to say that.
Funny. That's too funny. Out Magazine interviewed me yesterday and they were like, so what do you think of the movie? I was like, I don't fucking know. I haven't seen it. And you have a better chance of seeing it than I do. It's not even
we've actually been exposed. We're actually both the Khias of the movie. We're not even the stars.
Right. Charli couldn't even get us a screener, even though we're getting tagged in posts about being in it. That's real Khia behavior. But I feel like the conceit of the film itself is it's not even meta because it's like if Brat sold out and it's like, well, Brat wasn't an underground indie record. Like there were so many brand activations with Brat. Like it was her biggest commercial success ever. There was a tour.
Kamala was Brat. Kamala was Brat.
Literally, that killed it. So it kind of is like it almost feels like an accidental display of neuroses. It's like if I say that it could have happened worse, then it didn't happen as bad as I thought it did. I think that Charli is really struggling with letting it go. And I think that's because it's really hard to think about what iteration of her comes next because she doesn't really have like, in an ideal world, she could have a Lana Del Rey association with the market, right? Like she could just put anything out and people would buy it and move it and she would be in stadiums. But like Charli has one really big album, right? She has one moment that has pervaded culture in this way. And she's kind of got to have another one, I think, to really solidify her position as like a main pop girl. I don't think that it's quite a solid ground for her. And I think that she knows that. And that's why it's hard for her to let go. And I think that it's smart for her to focus on like film and like her other projects. Like I think this Wuthering Heights project is going to be really good, but I don't know that she's going to like, I fear that we would fall into another Crash situation where it's like, I'm going to make this really smart album. And it's like, okay, well, when you set out to make a really honest album, that tends to be smarter than the smart album that you want to make just from her like prior discography.
Not to like read too much into what she's doing because, I think conversations around people where you're kind of like displaying them playing 4D chess or something like that can be, a little pretentious and weird. But, it seems to me almost as if like, I don't know if she's aware of this or if she even feels this way about herself, but I just think, some artists are and some artists are. I just think there are some artists who work better underdog status. I don't know if Charli would make sense if she was ever at the level of like a Taylor Swift in terms of popularity, or relevance.
I don't think she could handle it either. I don't think it would do anything for her creatively. I don't think that would be fulfilling.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about personally, but like creatively, I don't know if it would make sense. I mean, I think, and I know you haven't heard this, but it was kind of surprising to me. This new kind of like mixtape of freestyles that J. Cole just came out with. And the thing about J. Cole in recent years was the fact that he like bowed out of the beef with Drake and Kendrick and sort of like completely avoided getting kind of engaging in that at all. And, there are a lot of fans who sort of like got down on him and were like really upset that he didn't like have what they wanted in him to sort of like, play into that in the way that he did. And it sort of like, really sort of brought him down from a certain status. For years, people were kind of talking about like, what the big three in hip hop are in terms of like the, current artists that are like working.
Oh, I know. I watched FD Signifier's video about this. I'm clued in. I'm clued in. And how do you know I didn't listen to the J. Cole mixtape? I'm an enigma. You don't know what I
Okay, all right, fine. Shout out to FD
You're
Signifier.
talking to number one J. Cole fan.
A shout out to FD Signifier. A shout out to that I did not anticipate in this conversation. But like, he sounds so hungry on this set of freestyles, and he does acknowledge the fact that he is like effectively a little bit in a hip hop Khia Asylum right now because of that whole situation. And I was like, damn, maybe this is like, in a way, this is like what this guy needed in this moment.
There's a freedom. There's a freedom to being
for sure. And you know, and the thing is, like,
expect anything good from you.
And if Charli ends up sort of like souring some people, not everyone, because, you know, there are some people who are in on sort of like the repetitiveness of the meme. But if Charli ends up souring some people against her because she's like really feeding into this Brat thing in an annoying way, and then she ends up like dropping a handful of soundtracks that people are just kind of like, why are we hearing another soundtrack? Like, that might be enough to sort of like bring her down a little bit so that when she does again, like focus on another serious album, people are like, oh, okay, wow. Like, you're trying again, you're doing this, like we're actually like here, you know. It kind of changes expectations, and you're not like, oh, are you going to do something as good as Brat again? Because I mean, if you try to force that immediately off the bat, it's probably not going to work.
So you want her to flop, is what you're saying?
I want her to flirt with flopping, just flirt with it a little bit, so that other people who are less tuned in are like, oh, she's flopping right now, you know. And then when you least expect it,
she can bounce back. No, I agree. Creating from a place of underdog is a great place to be, which is why Taylor Swift has to like manufacture a place of underdog, even though she's been like the apex predator of the music industry for like 15 years. She has to like put herself in a space of everyone's attacking me and I have something to prove. And generally, like, when you lean into that position, I think as any kind of creative with something to prove in public, like, that ends up yielding an interesting result. And Charli is like kind of off-putting naturally as an artist. Like, I think that she makes creative choices very instinctively, and she is generally like quite ahead of her time. So she's always operating on a kind of semi-different wavelength to everyone else. And the real danger, I think, is trying to play with all the other people that are like doing the same thing. She works best, I think, when she's trying to identify something new and something different. And I think she's in a growing pain right now, which is why we need to let it go.
Maybe what I think is like kind of the last question here, going forward into the immediate future, do you see the knowledge acceptance of this term sort of rising even higher than where it is now? Because I feel like part of the reason we've reached a fever pitch and we're seeing artists kind of reference it in the way that they are is we've pretty much had a generation of pop listeners now raised on the idea of this concept, you know? So now like a lot of the older pop artists, or, you know, pop artists who are now coming up and are kind of like reaching their peaks, kind of grew up in these discourse circles with people like kind of bringing up this term. So like they kind of grew up with it in a way. Like, how long, or is this even a point you think we're even going to reach? Like, how long until we're doing songs or lyrics like referencing the idea? Or, you know, will there always be a point to which referencing it or acknowledging it is like a little too cringe and it should just sort of like, you know, stay in the trenches?
You know what? I think we're kind of closer to it being in a song than we realize. I will say the artists that are referencing it are terminally online artists, like Zara Larsson, Bebe Rexha, Charli XCX. These are not the Beyoncés. These are not the Ariana Grandes. These are not the Taylor Swifts. Like, we're not talking about like the creme de la creme. I don't think that's going to be making its way into any of those spaces anytime soon. But I can't imagine that this is going to have a net positive impact on either stan culture, fan culture, music discourse, or artists in general, because I do think that it is a reductive term. Like, we've talked about it in a way where I think there are a lot of layers to it. It's an interesting cultural phenomenon to unpack. But when I see it being invoked more often than not, it's not in a way where you're like considering the choices of how someone, you know, got here and what kind of things could they have done differently. It's a pejorative. Like, that really is. It's a slur. It's a pop
we
slur.
are giving it.
We are giving it.
We are giving it some nuance, and we are analyzing it. But this is not the way people use this term, and this is not the way people employ this term. And, you know, maybe by virtue of that, it needs to die. It should maybe
it does.
It's better
and it's
suited
so
to go
subjective.
away.
It's so subjective. Like the information that I've given you today could be completely like negated. And I'm sure it will be debated online about what I've said about what the definitions of it are or aren't. It really depends on like what you like and who you ride for, which is a really stupid way to approach any sort of, as you know, conversation about like music discourse or criticism. It's not really, and I don't believe that you have to be objective or fair when delivering criticism. Fair, yes. Objective, no. But like Khia is so subjective that like to use it in any sort of like serious parlance is nonsensical. The artists can use it. Actually, the artists, it gets thrown at them. So I'm like, reclaim the slur. If they want to talk about it, they want to break out, say it. But I feel like we, the commentators, the viewers, the spectators, we should cut it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think sort of like reclaiming or sort of acknowledging it so it can't be used against you as a weapon can probably be a healthy thing for some artists, depending on sort of like how or how not online they're perceived to be. You know, if you're savvy about that world and about the discourse, probably why not, you know, but it can't read as desperation.
No, poor Bebe Rexha. I also think in general, like we need to use it and apply it more to men. Like it really is kind of almost a gendered insult at this point.
It is pretty gendered.
I think that there are so many male Khias. I mean, let's get them out here. Alex Warren, Benson Boone, Justin Timberlake, Justin Bieber from time to time. I mean, Drake is a Khia, sorry. Oops, wrong pronunciation. But he is.
Damn. Even throwing Drake in the Khia Asylum.
Well, he's like the easiest one.
Swiftologist, I appreciate you bringing your PhD in the Khia Asylum and pop music broadly to this conversation. And we'll link to your YouTube channel down below, and you know, we'll link up for another conversation soon.
Always a pleasure, and I'm going to get you about torture poets. I'm just trying to think about how best to do it.
Okay.